So welcome students to another tutorial session of macroeconomics. This is the second week of tutorials, third week of lecturing. So we have already shared the 3 videos of lectures, and there have been a request by your friends also to upload the lecture slides, which we will try as much as possible to do so, because currently your lecturer is out of the country, but has been very supportive for the department as well as for you guys by sending the recorded lecture. So I will try to communicate the message, and hopefully in the future weeks you will be able to go through the slides as well. So far we have gone through. Last week we discussed about in the tutorial session. I straight away drill deep into macroeconomic variables, the problems which we are focusing currently, what is the scenario of the Sri Lankan context, and we discussed a numerical example for national accounts. So the today's plan is I'm not going in detail. Next week my plan is to go in detail for classical model of macroeconomics, where we will start to discuss in detail of the graphical illustration of the theoretical aspect. So today the session will be more or less a stepping stone for the next week's tutorial, and hopefully we might be able to go into a live session. Our plan was to go for a live session this week, but unfortunately the first 2 days of your tutorials were declared as public holidays, and apparently today, Thursday morning, we were supposed to have a combined session, but apparently I was needed for the faculty for a very important meeting, so I couldn't take the live session this morning. So to move forward with today's our focus areas and so forth, I will share my screen first, and I believe the screen is visible. So I will move to the PowerPoint presentation as well, and I will put it on full screen. So this is tutorial number 2. We have already worked up with what is macroeconomics, why macroeconomics. I didn't drill deep into, but this must be an exercise for the students to distinguish. You should be able to distinguish what is microeconomics, what is macroeconomics, because I will not go to that point, because this is something which we have done during the previous courses as well. And then we went on to discuss what is the current context in Sri Lanka, what are the challenges that we are facing, and what are the remedies which we can take to the current situation was discussed. I think if you can recall your memories of what we did last week, we shared a YouTube video also, and we tried to get a glimpse of what is happening. So this week, I will start off, also this week will be more of practical and the application of these theoretical concepts. Next week, we will go in depth of the theoretical concept. So real gross domestic product. So last week, you might have learned during national accounts also we calculated GDP. So GDP is basically measuring stuff, goods that are being produced, the final products. So here what we mean by real, I would say, I will also highlight that. Let me change. Yes. So here what we mean real is where we take into consideration of the price changes. So now you are very familiar of what we mean by price changes. So price changes is basically inflation. Okay, so price changes. So now currently we are experiencing high value of inflation. So we have a small session also to be discussed during today's session in regards to inflation, which is a stepping stone why classical models came into play. So gross domestic product is basically the products, the final products after all the efforts of household, the government, the firms, the end result of it. So the real, what do you mean by real in economics, is where you take into consideration of the price changes, so inflation. So basically you see in the beginning of this year, an Apple iPhone might have costed about close to 200,000. Now it might even cost to a good 500,000. So you see, because of the price changes, the value of the products also have increased, but that doesn't mean the increase of the value is because of added features or a different model, or it's not because of a new software update. It's merely because of the price changes, nothing else. The quality is the same, the features are same, the guarantee period is the same, nothing has changed, only the price has changed. That is because of the depreciation of the rupee value and appreciation of the dollar value. So if you look, I believe you might be able to see what I'm sharing right now. I will clear the annotations which I have made. So you see, last week also we discussed, these are data which is available with the information up to 2020 in terms of US dollars. The GDP of Sri Lanka is 80.71 billion. And last week, if you remember, we made a comparison, a clear comparison between the two countries, Ukraine and Nepal. And you see, currently there our productions are dropping. Because of the drop of productions, we will have many challenges in the future, because this value will keep on deteriorating in the future as well. So if you go to the annual reports of Sri Lanka Central Bank, so basically to get accustomed to this, you type in Central Bank Annual Report 2021, that is what I have typed in, and then you will get this search suggestion, and you can go and download the annual report. So it's good to get familiar, not because of anything. Now you are doing macroeconomics, then in future you will learn international trade. After that you will have managerial economics, you will have international finance, you will have development economics, you will have project management. These are all related to economic concepts. So it is always better to go hand in hand with the developments of the country. So here you can get any annual report from 1950 to 2021. You can get any annual report. So we have the 2021 version, and let's see, let's go to 1950. Okay, so it is readily available. The information is readily available, and you have different segments, different parts. So if it go to the introduction in 1950, if in the I can't exactly mention where, but in this central bank report in 1950, it clearly mentions not the central bank. I'm very sorry if not, if I'm correctly speaking, it was the World Bank report in 1950 have clearly mentioned if there is any country to develop in Asian region, it would be Sri Lanka. So Sri Lanka was far more advanced country when it was in 1950, but due to some obvious reasons and for due to certain reasons, we failed to capitalize on that market. So please get accustomed to this website. This should be a website where you keep on frequently going. The Sri Lanka Central Bank. Here you see you have information regarding the inflation as well. Let's have a discussion on that later on. But what is important for me is that you need to frequently visit this. And here you see the inflation. This is the NCPI, National Consumer Price Index, 21.50 currently. This is the scenario. And if you click here, I will take this into another website so that it will open up in another page. So here you have year on year compared to March previous year, that is 2021 March. අපි compare කරොත් 2021 මාර්තු මාසයයි 2022 මාර්තු මාසය එක බැලුවොත් inflation එක 121.5කින් වැඩි වෙලා තියෙනවා. So you see, and the economic growth is negative 1.5. This is just for the quarter number 3. So quarter number 3 කියන්නේ quarter number 3 ends in September, because this is based on the annual report 2021. So 2021 annual report, based on that they have calculated to quarter number 3. And then the policy rates, okay, these are the depository rates, then the lending rates. Here you see the interest rates for the number of years based on years for treasury bills, for treasury bonds, and the unemployment rate is 5.2%. So we will have a small discussion on unemployment as well. Population is almost 22 million, and our per capita income, which means our total GDP divided by this population, is close to 683,000, which means a single person in this country will be earning 683,106 annually. So that means if you take that into consideration, 683, okay, 106. So that is roughly about a monthly income of 56,925. So this is the average value basically a person is earning. But you know, this population here, 21.9 million, includes infants, includes you who are still studying, who is not working. Then there is clergy, it can be the Buddhist monks, it can be the priests of other religions, Christianity, Islam, Hindu, it can be the priest over there. So they are not doing a job. So so taking those also into consideration, then there can be people who are differently able, who cannot contribute physically to generate an income. So this 21.9 million includes them as well. Okay. So the main understanding is during the tutorial is I will prepare you for the exams as well as much as possible, because sir is doing a wonderful job. I need not to prepare you for 2 exams. My most important thing is how you learn the things you learn, the theoretical things, how can you apply in your day-to-day work. That is what I'm trying to figure out for yourself. So please do visit the annual report and the central bank, and also you can go through from the day Sri Lanka, the central bank was instated. From that very day, you can reach to any of the annual reports. So first annual report is from 1950. So this one I will keep to discuss later on. So key social indicators. So we were here, real GDP. I just want to figure out the GDP for year. So this is the GDP percentage. Have they given the GDP in terms of value? In terms of value, they haven't provided. Yes, in terms of value also you have here, you see in 2020 it was 81.3. So here this is 80.71, but please keep bit attention. You see here 2020, here there is this A and D. So what is this A and D? They have defined it here, provisional, and D is revised. So you know, when you do an annual report, ekapart hariyatama figures ganna baha, later on there can be adjustments. Okay, so this value is after revision. So for year 2021, they says it is 79.9. Okay, the GDP is 79.9 is the GDP value. Okay, so here we will go through. So basically now we know what is GDP, gross domestic product, and now we have got familiarized what is real GDP. Real GDP is where you take into consideration of the inflation. So you see this it's not just output, but it is the real output. So basically with this you have a clear understanding. Okay, inflation is being adjusted, right? So if we go back to our PowerPoint slide, so real gross domestic product is basically the output of a country. And then we have unemployment. Okay, now unemployment, when we went through the central bank reports, it mentioned the unemployment is roughly about 5.2 to quarter number 3 in 2021. So if you look the current figures, so we are done with the real GDP. So these are few informations where you can easily get yourself updated on internet. Okay. Please make sure while you spend time on the social media, other different platforms, name it Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, please spend time on these. Just Google and get yourself updated also. So here you see drastically, so we have figures from 1991. You see the unemployment rate was 14.66. That is out of the, so how is this unemployment rate taken into consideration is people who can actually work. Okay, so basically that is me and anyone who is not studying. You take the labor force rate. If you can recall your memories in A levels, you take the labor force rate එක අරගෙන ඒකෙන් තමයි මේ unemployment එක. එතකොට වැඩ කරන්න පුළුවන් මිනිස්සු 100ක් ඉන්නවා නම් ඒ මිනිස්සු 100න් 14 දෙනෙක්ට, this is 14.66, no, that is close to 15%. 115කට ආසන්න ප්‍රමාණය. කියන්නේ මිනිස්සු 100ක් වැඩ කරන්න පුළුවන් මිනිස්සු 100ක් ඉන්නනේ 100න් 15කට job නැහැ කියලා තමයි මේ කියන්නේ. Okay, so gradually you see the unemployment rate has been decreasing. It can be a result of because of free education. So people started to get educated. So because of that, they are knowledgeable, their skills increased. So because of that, that can be one reason why unemployment have decreased. Another reason can be because the country started to expand. So because of the country started to expand, many factories came into play, many companies started up. So because of that, many opportunities were created for people to get job opportunities. So that can be a reason. So you see after, right in 2002, after about 10 years, after a decade, it has been 8.76. And you see gradually it has been dropping. And our latest values, this is for 2020, you see it has been 4.84. And now you saw in 2021, it was like close to 5.2. It can be higher than that also because of COVID. You see unemployment is increasing. So there are a few challenges when unemployment is increasing in a country. There are a few challenges that a government faces, where the society itself face. So one big challenge is, when you have people who are unemployed, people who are not searching for jobs, then the government needs to bear an expense because some way they need to support those people. So as Hanasa, Samudi, Eva Keke, Eva, Evilla TNA, because there are certain families which adu ආදායම් ලාභී කියලා අපි කියන්නේ ඒගොල්ලන්ට support කරන්න රජයෙන් එක ක්‍රමවේදයන් ගෙනල්ලා තියෙනවා. But when you move into like development economics, you will learn that when a government supports, now I also mentioned this last week, when government gives 5,000 rupee notes, then අපි 5000 note දුන්නානේ COVID කාලේ. එහෙම දුන්නම ඉන්න මිනිස්සුත් බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන හැමදාම රජයක් විසින් 5000 නෝට්ටු print කරලා 5000 නෝට්ටු අතට දෙන්න. So you call it a poverty trap. So because of that, people expect government to do things. So because of that, you will not try to work hard. ඒකෙන් that unemployment වැඩි වෙන්න පුළුවන්. එහෙම unemployment වැඩි වුණාම රජයට දරා ගන්න පුළුවන් බරක් තියෙනවා. ඊට වඩා බර දරා ගන්න ගියාම may wagi economic problems face karanna puluwan. So you see printing money is bad in a crisis, and now we are facing that issue as well. So if you go through, you will get some other information also, unemployment rates for different similar country ranking. So you see in Sudan it is 17.71 and so forth, and Sri Lanka unemployment rate, you see annual change එක කොච්චරක්ද, everything is here. So Sri Lanka is roughly here 4.84. This is for data in 2020. So if you go down like Cambodia, if you go to like Cambodia or Solomon Islands, if you go to Laos, Myanmar, it says like for every 100 people there will not even be one person who is unemployed. So that is a good achievement, which means everyone in the country is working to increase the real GDP of the country. Now you might be wondering why am I talking about real GDP, then I came to unemployment. I will show you what is the platform behind of this for me to come and start discussing on this. Then gradually I will move to the inflation part. So, you know, inflation is now highly spoken. That is a word, uddamane kiyana is highly spoken in the community today. So one reason is that we have been printing money. Last week I discussed in detail the undial systems, then the other challenges that we are facing due to the depreciation of the rupee value. Okay, since of that, the prices have increased compared to the prices last week. This week, the prices have increased. So there are a lot of challenges that we as a country face. So you see inflation of Sri Lanka. This is inflation of Sri Lanka compared to the last 40 years or so, and we have a forecast up until 26, but this forecast might not include the economic crisis which we are facing. So highest that we have had is 21.5. Okay, if we go to Sri Lanka Central Bank, it says on year on year basis, CCPI based headline inflation continuously increased 29.8. That means compared to last year, April, year අවුරුද්දේ April එකෙන් 2021 April එක සසඳනකොට 2022 April වල inflation එක 29.8කින් වැඩි වෙලා තියෙනවා. So මේක actually monthly figure එකක් තමයි මේ දෙන්නේ. So if you look year on year changes මේ දීලා තියෙනවා මේ. What does CCPI means? Colombo Consumer Price Index, and they have given information. So may price index එක කොහොමද හැදෙන්නේ කියන එක is a different topic. If you can recall for A levels, මේක price basket එකක් තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ ඒ basket එක ඇතුලේ products තියෙනවා. ඒ products වල prices අරගෙන මේ aggregate value එකක් අරන් තමයි මේ index එක හදලා තියෙන්නේ. So that's a separate story. Accordingly, prices of items of non-food category recorded increases and information. The reason ඇයි මේ price increase එකට හේතුව දීලා තියෙනවා. Right, transport, petrol, diesel ගිහිලා තියෙනවා, education, tuition fees and so forth all are being given. So now මේ 29.8, but මෙතන අපි information ගත්තොත් like කියන්නේ 5.2, 6.5. What does this mean? So basically this value is a monthly value. Okay, this is a monthly value. එතකොට මේ වගේ මාස 12ටම 29 වගේ තිබ්බ තමයි average value එකක් එන්නේ. When මෙතනට අපිට average value. So basically if you take in 1990, average our inflation has been 21.5. ඒ කියන්නේ මාස 12ම inflation එක. So I think we might be somewhere around here. It is very a sad situation because we have been in double figures. We first got into double figures on year in December. It was like somewhere around 12.5. Then on Jan it became something 15, and later on it has become 17. Now it has become 29. So I think this year on average we might end up somewhere around 18 and in between 18 and 24%. I believe, I don't know. So let's see. So you see there are certain years that there have been high inflation, especially in 1990, and then you see there have been a drop. Then in 1996, the year we won the World Cup, it has been 15.94. Then it has gone drastically down. In 1999, it was like 4.69. So 21.5 have been the highest during the past 3-4 decades. And the lowest has become 2.24 in 2015, where actually we had a new president in that year. So that was the year where from Mahinda Rajapaksa we went to Maithripala Sirisena. So it can be due to economic, but you see, inflation is something which happens over. It doesn't happen other in the inflation එක වැඩි වෙන්නේ. It is a result of a number of years. So you see this 2.24 has been a reason. From 2012 onwards, there have been a drop. So there might be some good things that have been done during those years or for the decades and so forth. But we have been capable enough to be below 10%, but I don't think we will definitely exceed 10% this year. So you can get certain information, you can get thorough here. So we go to the last area, budget deficit. So I don't want to explain this little information in depth. So, but it's better if you get yourself familiar regarding the budget deficit. Right. So budget deficit, Sri Lanka has been throughout on budget deficit this week, where our Minister for Finance, Ali Sabri, have mentioned that the last year budget that was proposed in the parliament is not going to be any further valid for this reason, for this year, because of the crisis. So the amendments for the budget will be proposed, is being proposed. So let's see the future of it. So budget deficit, I'm not going to touch in deep because we have about 3 to 4 sessions to discuss about the budget deficit towards the end of your lecture series. So now that is going to be the stepping stone, students, to our most important area that we were going to discuss today. So that is why I started off with discussing the unemployment, inflation, and the real GDP and things. There was a reason behind of it. So if we go to here, the Sri Lankan government budget, let me touch there also, you see, have always been in deficit. So for the last, ever since the day I happen to know about the budgets, we have been on deficit. So last year, in year 2020, we have been in deficit compared to the previous year by 11.1%. So you see, continuously we have been on budget deficit. So if you take countries like Australia, if you see countries like Australia, countries like Australia, for the last 100 years, they have been in budget deficits. Okay, so being in a budget deficit is not bad. So basically the reason why there's a deficit, your expenditure is greater than your revenue. But the problem is you need to balance these things off with other elements. So countries like Australia, what they do is they sell education. So students from Sri Lanka go to Australia and they get themselves educated. So there is an influx of revenue coming from Sri Lanka to Australia. So they sell tradable goods compared to Sri Lanka. So that is why they run as a developed country. So it's not bad. Why Sri Lanka have continuously maintained budget deficits is to attract also loans, aids, because you see other countries look into the budget of another country and say, okay, they are on deficit, we need to help them. අපිට මේක positive value එකක් තිබ්බොත් තව මිනිහෙක් දෙපාරක් හිතන්න පුළුවන් ඇයි අපි ගිහිල්ලා උදව් කරන්නේ මේ රටට. මේ රට ඇත්තටම is developing, has money, can do anything. So you can get hold of many information. Okay, the government debt is here, government revenue, you see there's a huge difference between what the government is earning and what the government is government's expenditure. Okay, so here you see the fiscal expenditure is close to about these are in millions. So here it's about 3 million, the revenue is about 1 million. Okay, these figures should change. Yeah, this might be in billions. So just check. Okay, so we go back to work today. So classical macroeconomics, why these classical models started to pop up. So these classical models actually came into play like in 1930s. Okay, so that was after the First World War. So try to recall your memories. This was after the First World War. First World War was from 1914 to 1918. So afterwards was this development, so-called classical macroeconomics. So at that time, basically, you had mercantilism. So at that time, there was this culture, there was this mercantilism. not the culture. Basically, that was the practice in that time of the world. So in 1930s, we had mercantilism. So what do we mean by mercantilism? There are two bases of mercantilism, which we have called here as Bullionism and role of the government. Okay, here Bullionism is basically, so Bullionism comes under mercantilism. So during 1930s, there was this, up until 1930s, there was this mercantilism concept. And what do you mean by mercantilism is there was two important factors or branches. One is Bullionism and other is role of the government. So what did you mean by Bullionism is where the country which has the most amount of precious stock is considered as the wealthiest nation on earth. එතකොට ඒ කියන්නේ වැඩියෙන්ම precious metal වැඩියෙන්ම වටිනාකමින් ඇති ලෝහ භාණ්ඩ තියෙන රට තමයි මේ ලෝකේ ධනවත්ම රාජ්‍ය ලෙස සැලකුවේ. So ඒක හින්දා තමයි you see Spaniards හරිද? Spanish කට්ටිය, then the British, Portuguese, the Dutch, ලංකාවට Spanish ලාවේ නැහැ. Dutch, Portuguese and British. එතකොට ඇමරිකා වගේ මේ ඒ වගේ රටවල් ඇමරිකා තිබුණෙත් නැහැ මුලදී. ඒ වගේ රටවල් කරේ අනිත් රටවල් වලට ගිහිල්ලා ඒගොල්ලන්ගේ රත්තරන් අර නිදන්ද ජුවල්රිද ඒව ඔක්කොම අරගෙන තමන්ගේ රටට අරන් ගියා. So they went into that is why they built up colonies. They invaded other countries, and from those countries they either stole or they took all the precious metal back into their motherlands. So that is why we as Sri Lankans, those days as Ceylonese, for more than 200-300 years, our valuable precious goods are being taken out from this country and was taken to Britain, was taken to Portuguese, was taken to Dutch, and those countries became wealthy countries in the world. Right? And countries like us became poorer because we didn't have precious metal. අපි ඉස්සර අර රජුරුවනත් නිදන් හංගල තියෙන්නේ අපිට ඕන වෙලාවට අපිට හදිස්සියක් වෙච්ච වෙලාවට ඒව නිදන් කියන්නේ රජුරුවන්ගේ reserves. So these reserves all have been taken because now if you know ලංකාවේ අදටත් තියෙනවා ලෝකයේ අදටත් තියෙනවා හැම රටකම gold reserves තියෙනවා. ලංකාවේ gold reserves නෑ. අපි gold reserves ගිය අවුරුද්දේ වික්කා. එතකොට gold reserve ඒ කියන්නේ සල්ලි නෙවෙයි රත්තරන් වලින් reserves තියෙනවා. අදිසියක් වුණොත් ඒව පාවිච්චි ගන්න. Every country has, right? So ඒ කාලෙත් that was the reason to accumulate most number of precious metal. So ඒකෙන් ආපු ප්‍රශ්නයක් තමයි ඒකෙන්ද තමයි classical model එක එන්නේ. ඒකෙන් ආපු ගැටලුවක් තමයි මිනිස්සු රටවල් try කරන්න පුළුවන් තරම් precious metal එකතු කරගන්න. ඒතකොට precious metal එකතු කරගන්න පුළුවන් ක්‍රම මොනවද? ඒක ඒතකොට ඒ කියන්නේ අපි ඒ කාලේ barter system හරි ඒ කාලේ සල්ලි වෙනුවට පාවිච්චි කරේ මේ ලෝහ වගේ භාණ්ඩ. It can be gold, silver, bronze වගේ දේවල් තමයි පාවිච්චි කරේ. එතකොට අපි මෙහෙන් හාල් කිලෝ එකක් දෙනකොට ඒ හාල් කිලෝ වලට සල්ලි වෙනුවට අපිට ඒ කාලේ සල්ලි පාවිච්චි කරේ නැහැ. They used gold and stuff. So in return, they got those precious metal. So what happened with this Bullionism concept is that people started to export more. අපනයනය කරා ආනයනය කරේ නැහැ. Imports reduced because import කරොත් මොනවද වෙන්නේ? අපේ precious metal අනිත් රටවල් වලට යනවා. ඒකින්ද අර ස්වයං පෝෂිත වෙනා වූ රටවල් බිහි වෙන්න පටන් ගත්තා. So because of that, poor countries will forever become poor. Now for an example, let's say in Sri Lanka, if we didn't have rice, අපිට agriculture කරන්න පොළොවක් මොනවා චාරවත් පොළොවක් තිබුණ නැත්නම් අපේ රටට ජීවිතේට හාල් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. Because we can't import, we are not in a position to import because we are trying to save a precious metal. අන්න ඒකෙන්ද trade එකක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ ලෝකේ. So because of that තමයි මේ classical model එක එන්න pop වෙන්න පටන් ගත්තේ. So that is one reason. Other reason is in the mercantilism concept, they said the role of the government is high. Government එක හැමතිස්සෙම interfere කරන්න ඕනේ. නමුත් classical model එකේ කිව්වේ නෑ අප ඒ government එක interfere කරන ප්‍රමාණය ඉතාම minimum වෙන්න ඕනේ කියන එකයි කිව්වේ. So basically අපි free market open market එකක අපි කතා කරන්නේ government එකේ role එක අඩුවෙන් free market එක role එක වැඩියෙන් සහ අපි දැන් precious metal කියන concept එකෙන්ම අයින් වෙලා තියෙනවා. So bullionism කියන එක දැන් නැහැ. So this all started in 1930s. එතකොට in 1930s there was high number of unemployment, there was high number of inflation and real GDP. අපි දැන් කතා කරනවා real GDP, the output was starting to get low. So because of that තමයි මේ classical model එකෙන් පටන් ගත්තේ හොයන්න ඇයි මේ unemployment ඇති වෙන්නේ, ඇයි මේ inflation ඇති වෙන්නේ, අපි කොහොමද මේ වලට උත්තර දෙන්නේ කියලා. So in like in USA in certain periods the relationship between unemployment and inflation has been negative. ඒ කියන්නේ unemployment වැඩි වෙනකොට inflation අඩු වෙනවා. Inflation unemployment adu වෙනකොට inflation වැඩි වෙනවා. And after about 2-3 decades you can't even comment on the relationship. ඒ කියන්නේ relationship එක inflation and unemployment වැඩි අඩු වෙන එක define කරන්න බැරි විදියක් තිබ්බා. Then later on there were positive relationships. When unemployment increases, inflation also increases. So ඒ වගේ කාල පරාසවල it started to vary. So the economists wanted to study what are the reasons as to why these changes happen, and they wanted to get rid of this mercantilism. So against mercantilism rise what? The classical model of macroeconomics. So that is the basis, right? If we go to the next slide. So aggregate demand. So basically aggregate demand was we were trying to those days, not we, the classical model economists were trying to determine aggregate demand. So basically from the demand for the outputs, demand for outputs, basically inflation and unemployment also was considered. So in depth we will start learning about it in the future weeks. And focus during this classical model, the main focuses were Hari, I mentioned the main focuses were, one thing is real factors of determining wealth of nation. So what the countries wanted to identify what were the real factors. Now having precious metal, having silverware, having goldware, having precious metal is not going to determine the real strength of the wealth of the nation. So what is it going to define? Mukadda. So currently the wealth of the nation can mukadda. අපේ ගාව තියෙන මේ reserves GDP කොච්චරක් හදලා තියෙනවද GDP එක සහ අපි ගාව තියෙන reserves වලින් තමයි අපේ strength එක දැන් පෙන්වන්නේ. So why is everyone trying to accumulate US dollars? Because US dollar is one of the most powerful currencies on the world, in the world, and everyone is trying their level best to have better, stronger currency. So not only the US dollar, you have sterling pound, which is a very powerful currency currently, and so forth. And the next thing is the need of free market. Now you remember in mercantilism we wanted more the government interfering, government coming into play, deciding that and this. But in the classical model they want the need of the free market. So which means government intervention is low. Government එක නිකන් ඇවිල්ලා rules ටික හදලා දෙනවා. You let the market to operate. And the next important thing is money as a means of exchange. Now සල්ලි කියන දේ බඩු මේ සල්ලි වලට ගන්න, ඒ බඩු භාණ්ඩ මොන හරි ගන්න, මේක exchange medium එකක් කියන එක important කියන එක strike කරා classical model එකේ. So these are the areas that I want to discuss in depth for the stepping stone. From next week onwards, we will be drilling deep into the graphical illustrations and so forth. But before we finish today's session, I want to move back into the central bank reports. So we are done with these. And I did also show how you reach to the central bank. So this is the 2021 report. So in 2021, if you go through the key economic indicators, so you see in 2021, our population has crossed the 22 million. So in 2020, it has been 21.9. And in 2021, we have crossed the mark of 22 million. And out of the 22 million, okay, more importantly වැඩ කරන ජනතාව වෙන මොනවද නෙවෙයි labor force is 8 million. ඒ කියන්නේ ලංකාවේ මිනිස්සු මිලියන 22ක් හිටියට වැඩ කරන්න පුළුවන් මිනිස්සු ඉන්නේ මිලියන 8යි. එතකොට මේ මිලියන 14ක විතර වෙනසක් තියෙනවා. මේ 14 ඇතුලේ ඉන්නවා ළමයි ඉන්නවා. ඒ කියන්නේ අවුරුදු grade 1 ඉඳලා 13 වෙනකන් ඉගෙන ගන්න කට්ටිය ඉන්නවා. ඊට පස්සේ යුනිවර්සිටි වල ඉන්න කට්ටිය ඉන්නවා. මම ඉස්සෙල්ලා කතා කරා වගේ differently able. ඒ වගේම පූජ්‍ය පක්ෂයේ කට්ටිය ඉන්නවා. ඒ වගේ වැඩ කරන්න බැරි කට්ටිය ඒ 14 මිලියන් ඇතුලේ ඉන්නවා. right? එතකොට unemployment rate එක you see is 5.1. and output මේක දීලා තියෙනවා GDP දීලා තියෙනවා gross national income basis එකේ දීලා තියෙනවා and current price market price we have discussed this in the previous session කොහොමද මේ market price එක එන්නේ basic price එක එන්නේ කොහොමද කියන එක we have discussed and these are the three important sectors. I am giving you the practical application as well. Agriculture, industry as well as services are the three sectors in the Sri Lanka. The three main sectors, right? ඊට පස්සේ මෙතන මේ inflation values දීලා තියෙනවා 7 point. ඊට මේ CCPI Colombo Consumer Price Index එක තියෙනවා, National Consumer Price Index එක තියෙනවා, right? So ඒවල values දීලා තියෙනවා. External trade අපේ බලන්න export. So this is basically the trade deficit. Okay. It's close to 8 billion if I'm not mistaken, minus 8 billion. This needs to be in billions. Okay, it's in millions. So 8,139 million is basically 8 billion. Okay, so you see we exports closer to 12 billion and we import 20 billion. So etana thamai oy negative gap එක එන්නේ, right? So that is why අපේ currency එක depreciate වෙන්නේ because අපේ imports වැඩි. එතකොට අපි demand කරනවා US currency එක වැඩි. US currency එක demand කරන ප්‍රමාණයටම අපේ මේ exports එන්නේ නැහැ. So because of that there is a huge gap. 8 billion කියන්නේ ලොකු ප්‍රමාණයක්. මේ 8 billion කියන්නේ මේ 8 billion කියන්නේ මේ අවුරුද්දට අපිට ගෙවන්න තියෙන ණය අපිට මේ 8 billion positive වෙලා තිබ්බනම් අපිට මේ අවුරුද්ද ගෙවන්න තියෙන ණය is just 5.5 billion. right? අපිට ඒ ණය ගෙවලා ඉවර කරන්නත් තිබ්බා. ඊට පස්සේ ඉතුරු 3 billion වලින් අපිට තෙල් ගේන්නත් තිබ්බා. okay, but unfortunately this is a negative value. okay, then external finances and so forth. මේ key indicators හුඟා තියෙනවා. right? එතකොට මේ chapter number 4 එන්නේ මෙන්න මෙතනට ගියාන් පස්සේ මේ 4 එකේ එවුවම you will get chapter number 4. එහෙම තමයි මම මේවා අරන් තියෙන්නේ. So social indicators, so population we discussed, and there are very important information also. You get familiar with these things as well. Now you see Sri Lanka, we tell Sri Lanka අවුරුදු 2500 for more than 2500 years we have been doing agriculture. රජුරෝ වැව් හැදුවා, අරව මේව හැදුවා. But if you take our total GDP, රජුරෝ වැව් හැදුවත් වැඩක් නැහැ. We contribute only 6.9%. That is almost about 7% from the total amount of GDP. What is GDP? Gross domestic product. That is the total number of products produced in the given number of period. There is a better theory, better definition for it, I would say. So from industries, we generate a GDP of 25.9. So the industries we have divided into 4 main sectors. One is mining and quarrying. The other is manufacturing. Then you have electricity, gas, water treatment separately. Then you have construction. So out of the all of it, you see 16.1 is from manufacturing. තමයි industry එක ඇතුලේ component එක වැඩිම contribution එක දෙන්නේ. මෙතන fishing වල දෙන්නේ only 1%. The rest of the 6.1 is from agriculture and forestry. Then the biggest component comes from 58.7, that is services, and out of it the biggest component is 22.6%. that is this wholesale, retail, trade, transportation, storage, accommodation, food service activities. What does this mean? This is about commerce. Department of Commerce is responsible for this 22.6 of this country, right? So as commerce students, make sure we have a bigger role in the future to be done, right? because මේවා agriculture වලට වෙනම කට්ටිය mining and quarry manufacturing this is මේ කෙලින්ම මේ services වල මේ part එකම commerce එකට කෙලින්ම directly related and then you see information and communication is 0 point but මේ බලන්න ලොකුවට improve වෙලා නැහැ compared to the previous year 2020 අපි ලොකුවට improve වෙලා නැහැ which we need to right so that is the GDP contribution percentages and this is a quick snapshot of last year we have so you remember in GDP calculation methods production approach expenditure approach income approach national accounts all three areas are being discussed so this is the practical application theoretically you have learned the three approaches now you can go through the central bank and see what you learn from theory how it is being used to get the current market price for these different approaches so you have the labor market also I discussed about the labor component and economically inactive population labor force participation rate and so here you see unemployment has reduced compared to 2020 but it is always better to have it closer to 3%. 5% unemployment is okay for a country. It's not a bad value, but we can improve further. So with that, I would like to wrap up. Next week, I will come with the graphical illustration where we will discuss about the classical model employment. We will discuss about the marginal product of labor and so forth. Okay, so all the best. And if you have any queries, please reach us. We would prefer to reach, the preferred method would be via email and we are fine with other social media platforms, but always we will not be able to communicate through social media platforms because we use it for different purposes as well. So for emails, we will reply as the best we could do. And as I promised in the beginning, I will try to discuss with Asar, who is out of the country currently, to get back to you with the slides. So all the best. With that, I would conclude this session 2 for week number 3 of lectures. Thank you.